It was 7:42 a.m. when my phone buzzed against the kitchen table. I remember the exact time because the coffee hadn't even finished brewing yet, and the morning light was still weak through the blinds. The notification said, "Unknown sender. You should see this." At first, I thought it was one of those scam links people warn you about on the news. But curiosity, it's a dangerous thing. I tapped it anyway. They thought I'd always forgive them, until the day I stopped. Watch till the end. Because some betrayals deserve silence, not mercy. A video started playing. The first thing I heard was laughter. Familiar laughter. My daughter's, sharp and bubbling. Then my husband's low chuckle, the same one he used when pretending to compliment me in front of guests. The camera tilted and there they were, my entire family, sitting around my own kitchen table, the one I had polished every night for 32 years. "Mom still uses that old kettle, doesn't she?" my daughter said. "She'll probably leave it to us in the will." They all laughed again. My son added, "If she ever makes one." The camera shook with whoever was holding it. Someone was filming this. From the reflection in the glass cabinet, I could see the outline of another person's arm. A stranger. My hand froze around the mug. The sound of their voices filled the house, mocking me in real time though I was standing right there listening. It didn't feel like anger at first. It felt like watching my own obituary written in jokes. I let the video play. My husband leaned back in his chair. "She'll never leave, you know. She doesn't have anywhere to go. Women like her rot in their own homes." Something inside me went cold steady. I pressed pause. The coffee maker clicked behind me, sputtering steam. Outside, a dog barked, and the world kept moving as if it hadn't just ended for me. I stood there a full minute before I finally whispered to myself, "So that's what I am to them." The words tasted like metal. I poured the coffee anyway. Old habits don't die just because love does. The smell filled the kitchen, that same rich scent that once meant family mornings, pancakes, laughter. Now it just felt like camouflage for betrayal. I sat down again, watching the video frame frozen on their faces. My daughter's smirk looked almost proud, like she'd earned the right to laugh at me. My husband's eyes were on her, not me. Always her. I noticed something strange then, the timestamp on the corner of the screen. It was recorded yesterday. So this wasn't some old video or a misunderstanding. They had sat here mocking me less than 24 hours ago while I was at the grocery store buying their favorite bread. Whoever filmed it had been in my house. That realization made my heart thump against my ribs like it wanted out. I looked toward the kitchen window. The morning light felt too bright, too exposed. I replayed the clip from the beginning. This time I noticed details. The chipped edge of my mug in the background, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the pile of letters on the counter. Every frame screamed that it was my home. My sanctuary. My stage for their cruelty. Halfway through the video my son's voice dropped. "Once she's gone we can finally sell this place. Dad already talked to a realtor." "Don't joke," my daughter said, giggling anyway. "I'm not joking," he replied. "She won't fight. She never does." They were right about one thing. I didn't fight. Not then. I pressed stop, placed the phone face down and stared at the faint ring the mug left on the table. My breathing was steady, too steady. I'd learned long ago that silence could hurt more than shouting. I looked around the kitchen. The little cracks on the wall I kept meaning to paint, the family photos on the fridge, the crooked curtain my granddaughter once helped me hang. Every inch of this house carried fingerprints of care, and suddenly, every mark felt stolen. My mind began to trace small things I had ignored. My husband's frequent business calls, my daughter's sudden interest in helping with my bank errands, my son asking for the property papers just in case. They weren't helping me, they were preparing. A kettle whistle broke through my thoughts. I turned it off quickly. The noise was unbearable. My hands shook, not from fear but from something older. Exhaustion that had finally found its edge. I took my phone again and read the message that came with the video. Just one sentence. "You deserve to know what they say when you're not home." No name, no number, just truth delivered by a stranger. My first instinct was to call them, to confront, to demand answers. But the image of them laughing stopped me. They'd twist it, say I misunderstood, tell me it was just a joke. I'd be the emotional one again, the overreacting mother. But not this time. Instead, I opened my notebook, the one I kept for grocery lists, and wrote 3 words across the first page. Change the locks. The act felt small, almost ridiculous, but it steadied me. I finished my coffee in silence, the bitter taste grounding me. The house was still quiet. Everyone had left early for the weekend trip they'd planned. A short getaway, they said. I had believed them. Now it sounded like an escape from guilt they didn't feel. I spent the next hour moving through rooms like a guest in my own life. In the living room, the cushions still carried the shape of their bodies. In the hallway, my husband's coat hung beside mine, touching at the sleeves. I stepped back, separating them. Something inside me shifted. I wasn't their background anymore. I was the author of the ending. Before noon, I called the locksmith. Routine replacement, I said lightly, pretending nothing was wrong. He promised to come Monday morning. Make sure they're strong ones, I added. The kind you can't open without the right key. He laughed. Of course, ma'am. If only he knew. I spent the afternoon cleaning, slowly, deliberately. Every sweep of the broom felt like wiping away years of being taken for granted. I even polished the silverware they used the night before, imagining their fingerprints dissolving under my cloth. As the sun started setting, I found myself sitting on the porch watching the neighborhood children play. Their laughter didn't hurt like my family's did. It was honest, innocent. Somewhere deep down, I realized I wasn't angry at laughter. I was angry at mockery disguised as love. At 6:15 p.m., I heard a car door slam. My neighbor, Ruth, waved as she came up her driveway. You all right, Mary? She asked. You look like you've seen a ghost. I smiled. Maybe I have. But I sent it back where it came from. She chuckled, not understanding. Well, you take care now. I will, I said, meaning it for the first time in years. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The video replayed in my mind on an endless loop. I decided to watch it one last time, hoping to dull the pain through repetition. But something new caught my attention. The faint reflection of a wristwatch on the arm holding the camera. Gold, square-faced. My husband owned one exactly like it. My breath hitched. So he wasn't just laughing, he was filming. The betrayal deepened, not just mockery but documentation. Evidence. Proof of pride. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the phone screen lighting my face. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, as if measuring the time between who I was and who I was about to become. My mind began arranging plans as easily as folding laundry. The locks, the accounts, the papers. But I also thought about details, his favorite chair, her framed photo on the mantel, the birthday cake pan they all loved. I would leave them all exactly as they were. Let the emptiness look familiar when they came home. By dawn, my decision was complete. Not out of rage but precision. I placed my phone on the counter, screen up, and whispered, "Thank you," to the stranger who had sent it. Whoever they were, they had handed me my freedom. The following evening, just before they returned from their weekend trip, I printed a still image from the video. All three of them mid-laugh, eyes cruel, mouths wide open. I slipped it into a plain envelope and wrote on it, "For the deserving." Then I placed it on the dining table. I didn't leave the house that night. I wanted to see their faces. I brewed tea, turned off the lights, and waited in the dim kitchen. When the front door opened and I heard their footsteps, my pulse slowed instead of quickening. "Mom," my daughter called out. "In here," I answered calmly. They entered the kitchen, still smelling of travel, carrying the warmth of a family I no longer recognized. My husband smiled faintly, uncertain. "You're back early?" I slid the phone across the table, the paused video still visible. "Someone sent me a little home movie," I said softly. For the first time in years, silence belonged to me. Their smiles faded as the screen lit their faces, and the air between us turned heavy enough to break. I didn't speak again. I didn't need to. The truth was playing right in front of them. And as the kettle began to whistle behind me, I simply said, "You might want to sit down." The rest could wait. Tomorrow would belong to the woman they had forgotten I was. I kept hearing that line in my head long after they went to bed that night. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the old clock above the sink ticking out its steady judgment. Their voices were gone, their laughter erased, yet the walls still felt contaminated by everything they'd said. When dawn crept through the blinds, I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with my cup of tea gone cold. I could hear them upstairs moving around, whispering. Not one of them came down to say good morning. The air between floors felt like a frozen lake. Silent but dangerous if you stepped too hard. I started breakfast anyway. Bacon sizzling, toast popping. The motions were muscle memory, things my hands did even when my heart refused to follow. When they finally came down, I placed the plates in front of them like I always had. My daughter couldn't meet my eyes. My husband muttered a half-hearted thanks. My son asked for orange juice and scrolled through his phone. I watched them eat as if they were guests renting space in my life. Every bite sounded too loud, too careless. "You should take it easy today," my husband said without looking at me. "You seemed upset last night." "I'm fine," I answered quietly. "Just saw things clearly for the first time." He frowned, not understanding, or pretending not to. Either way, it didn't matter. The truth was already sitting between us, invisible but solid as the table itself. When they left for work and errands, I stood in the doorway watching their cars disappear down the street. The house finally exhaled. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. The quiet wasn't empty, it was honest. I began cleaning not because it needed it but because I needed movement. The scent of lemon polish filled the air as I dusted picture frames, one by one. I stopped at a photo of us at the lake, my arm around my daughter's shoulders. She was smiling at the camera. I was smiling at her. Now I couldn't remember what that smile felt like. I slid the photo into a drawer. The shelf looked better without it. Around 10 I called the locksmith. "Routine change," I said. "New locks for all doors." "Any particular reason?" he asked. "Let's just say I need the kind that remember who they belong to." He laughed politely and promised to come by that afternoon. While waiting, I went through the desk drawers. Bills, insurance papers, warranty cards. The usual clutter of a lifetime. But tucked inside an envelope was a folded document with my husband's handwriting on the label. Property evaluation, pending sale. My fingers went numb. Inside were notes from a realtor, complete with the current market price of our home and a section titled, "Owner's Consent Needed." My husband's signature was already there. Mine wasn't. I sat back in the chair, the papers trembling in my hands. So it wasn't just talk, they had already started. The video hadn't been a careless joke. It was rehearsal for a plan. At noon the locksmith arrived. A young man, friendly, smelling faintly of motor oil. He removed the old brass locks, setting them on the counter. I watched as each one clinked against the surface. Small metallic coffins for every piece of trust I'd ever given. "You moving out soon?" he asked casually. "No," I said, smiling faintly. "I'm just making sure I'm the one who stays." He blinked, nodded, and went back to work. By the time he left, the new locks gleamed in the sunlight, firm and precise. I slipped the new keys into my apron pocket and pressed my hand against them. For once I felt the house respond, secure, obedient, mine. I spent the afternoon walking through every room. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and lavender, the same scent I used when my children were small. Back then they'd run barefoot through this space, leaving fingerprints on the walls I refused to wash away. I had built this home brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, and memory by memory. Now I was realizing those memories belonged to strangers who shared my last name but not my heart. In the living room I found my daughter's laptop left on the sofa. She'd been careless as always. A part of me hesitated but another part whispered, "You deserve to know." I opened it. The screen blinked to life with her recent messages. One thread caught my eye, her conversation with my husband. "Dad, lawyer says once she's settled in that retirement place, we can move quickly." Daughter, "Good. She'll thank us later." Dad, "She always does." My hands tightened around the edges of the laptop until the plastic creaked. Retirement place. They'd already chosen a future for me. A quiet corner somewhere to wait out the rest of my days while they cashed in on my years of work. I shut the laptop and placed it exactly where I'd found it. My breathing steadied. No tears, no shouting. Just focus. If they had a plan, then so did I, and mine didn't involve gratitude. That evening when they returned, the atmosphere was wrong in ways only I could feel. My husband kissed the air beside my cheek, my daughter chatted about her day, and my son dropped his backpack near the stairs. I looked at them and saw actors fumbling through a script they didn't realize I'd already read. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Forks against plates, the hum of the refrigerator, the steady pulse of secrets pretending to be routine. "How was your day?" my daughter asked, eyes flicking toward me but never meeting mine. "Productive," I said. "I made some changes." "What kind of changes?" my husband asked. "Oh, you'll see," I replied lightly, slicing through my chicken. They didn't press further. Guilt has a way of keeping people polite. Later, after everyone went to their rooms, I walked through the house once more. The locks clicked beautifully when I tested them. Clean, firm, final. I lingered in the doorway of my bedroom, staring at the mirror above the dresser. The woman reflected there looked older, yes, but sharper too. Not fragile, refined. The kind of strength that comes from being broken the right number of times. Before sleeping, I sat on the edge of the bed and wrote in my notebook again. They built their comfort on my silence. I'll build my peace on their confusion. Then I turned out the light. The next morning, the consequences began small. My husband left early for work but came back 5 minutes later, fumbling with his key. "Did you change the locks?" he asked from the porch. "Yes," I said through the door. "Safety reasons." "Where's the new key?" "I'll give it to you later," I lied, voice calm. "Have a good day." The sound of his car driving off was better than any apology. Around lunchtime, I heard my daughter shouting from the front door. "Mom, my key's not working." I opened a window instead of the door. "Oh, I had them replaced. I'll fix it when I get the chance." She looked stunned. "You could have told us." "I thought you'd enjoy surprises," I said sweetly, then closed the window. Every locked door was a sentence rewritten, every click an act of quiet rebellion. That evening, I sat on the porch watching rain gather in the driveway. The smell of wet soil filled the air, reminding me of the spring we planted roses together. The same roses now trimmed short and dying from neglect. I realized the garden was a perfect metaphor, tended by one, admired by all, forgotten by those who reaped its beauty. I went inside and opened the kitchen drawer where the property papers were kept. Carefully, I placed the realtor documents beside them, the evidence of their betrayal. I slid the drawer shut and whispered, "Not yet." It wasn't time to act fully, it was time to prepare. At 8 p.m. the house phone rang. It was Ruth, my neighbor. "Mary, I saw a man checking your fence earlier. Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "Just someone realizing he no longer has access." "Your husband," she guessed. I didn't answer. Some truths are too satisfying to confirm aloud. That night I couldn't sleep again. The house groaned softly with the wind. I walked through the rooms, barefoot, feeling the cool tiles under my feet. It struck me how different silence felt when it belonged entirely to me. Every corner, every echo finally answered to no one else. I paused by the window and saw the faint outline of my husband's car parked down the street. Watching. Waiting. He hadn't gone far. Maybe he thought I'd let him back in. I turned off the porch light. Let him sit there in the dark and wonder who I'd become. Before going back to bed, I opened my notebook once more and added a new line. "Tomorrow the house will learn who it truly belongs to." The clock struck midnight. Somewhere upstairs, a door creaked as if the walls themselves were listening. I smiled to myself. For the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready. I whispered it again at sunrise, standing barefoot by the window. The world outside was pale blue and quiet. Even the sparrows on the fence seemed unsure whether to sing. My husband's car was still parked halfway down the street. He hadn't come inside all night. Cowardice has a strange smell, like damp leather and fear left in the open too long. I made tea and carried the steaming mug into the living room. The new locks caught the morning light, their metal edges clean and certain. They looked like soldiers standing guard, and for once they were guarding me. I sat down on the sofa and began making a list. Every item had a purpose. Call lawyer. Empty joint account. Move documents. Pretend to leave. Record everything. By 7:30 I was on the phone with my lawyer, Ms. Harris, a patient woman who had drawn up our wills years ago. "I need to update my paperwork," I said evenly. "Any changes in beneficiaries?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "All of them." Her pause was brief but telling. "Understood. Come in tomorrow morning, we'll make it right." After hanging up, I looked around the room. The house was still filled with traces of them. My husband's coat slung across the armchair, my daughter's shoes near the door, the smell of my son's cologne in the hallway. Proof that they believed this place was already theirs. That belief would be their first mistake. Before noon, I took out an old suitcase and laid it open on the bed. I filled it with folded towels, an empty purse, a stack of outdated magazines. If anyone peeked inside, it would look like I was leaving for a weekend trip. I even tucked in a travel toothbrush for effect. I zipped it shut and left it by the door, visible, believable. At lunchtime I called my daughter. Sweetheart, I said softly, I'm thinking of visiting Aunt Lydia for a few days. That's good, Mom, she said quickly, relief slipping through her tone. You need a break. Yes, I answered. A break is exactly what I need. When she hung up, I smiled to myself. Her voice carried no curiosity, no concern, just anticipation. The thought that I'd be gone pleased her. That was the confirmation I needed. The afternoon passed quietly. I pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up, the dust greeting me like old ghosts. Boxes stacked in uneven towers smelled of cedar and thyme. I searched until I found my husband's old camcorder, the one he used when the kids were young. I charged its battery and placed it on a small shelf facing the front door. Not to spy but to witness. Some truths deserve to be seen in their purest form. By 5 o'clock I stood outside watering the wilted roses. Ruth from next door waved, walking her dog. Going somewhere, Mary? She called. Just a small trip, I said, glancing at the house. Finally taking a little rest. Well, you've earned it, she smiled. They'll manage without you. I'm counting on that, I murmured. That evening I cooked a full dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. The smell filled every corner, wrapping the rooms in a kind of false comfort. When my family came home, their surprise was almost theatrical. You cooked? My husband said, his tone uncertain. I thought we could have one peaceful meal, I replied, wiping my hands. He nodded warily. My daughter's eyes flicked to the suitcase by the door. You're really going? She asked. Tomorrow morning, I said. Early. Dinner passed without a word about the video. They were pretending it never existed, hoping silence could erase what they'd done. I let them believe that. Every lie they told themselves made my truth stronger. After dishes, I sat alone in the kitchen while they watched television. I opened my notebook again and wrote down every step that still remained. The pen's scratch against paper was rhythmic, steady. This was my orchestra now, each stroke a note of quiet vengeance. Around 9, I heard the faint sound of my husband on the phone in the den. His voice was low but not low enough. Yes. Monday morning is fine, he said. She'll be gone by then. Gone. He didn't even lower his voice when he said it. I wanted to laugh, but laughter felt too soft for what lived inside me now. I slipped into the hallway and recorded the last few seconds of his call on my own phone. A souvenir. Later, while they slept, I walked through each room one final time. In the office, I gathered all the legal papers, passports, and financial documents into a neat stack. I replaced them with blank folders. Let them open drawers full of emptiness. In the living room, I swapped the family photo on the mantel for one of myself taken years ago on the day I bought this house. The day before I married him. My eyes in that picture were younger but already wise enough to recognize ownership. It felt fitting that she, not they, would watch over what was mine. I barely slept. The next morning, I dressed neatly, fixed my hair, and placed the suitcase in the trunk of my car. The performance had begun. As I backed out of the driveway, I caught my husband peeking through the curtain. I waved. He waved back uncertainly. That image would be my favorite memory of him. Small, unsure, and completely unaware that he'd just been locked out of his future. At the lawyer's office, Ms. Harris greeted me with her usual calm smile. Ready? She asked. More than ready. For 2 hours we worked through every document. Will, property deed, power of attorney. My husband's name vanished line by line, replaced by my own and a charitable trust for a local shelter. When we finished, she looked at me and said, "You seem lighter." "I am," I said. "It's remarkable how much weight a signature can carry." On the way home I stopped by the bank. The clerk recognized me. "Joint account, Mrs. Turner?" "Not anymore," I said pleasantly. "I'd like to transfer the balance into a new personal account." Within minutes, decades of savings were under my name alone. When the teller handed me the receipt, I slipped it into my coat pocket like a final key. Back at home, I left the car parked around the corner so no one would suspect I'd returned. I entered through the back gate, unlocking the new door quietly. The house felt colder, emptier, and somehow freer. The camcorder's red light blinked softly, ready. I repositioned it toward the hallway where the front door stood. Then I sat on the staircase, listening. For the next several hours I prepared. I deleted family photos from the computer, wiped the shared drive, and placed the property documents inside a fireproof box beneath my bed. Everything was methodical, unhurried. Revenge done right should always look like housekeeping. Around dusk I heard Ruth's knock. "Forgot to give you these," she said, handing me a small basket of scones. I smiled. "You're too kind." "You sure you're leaving tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes," I lied again, "but I'll be back before anyone misses me." If only she knew how true that was. After she left, I brewed another pot of tea and sat by the window. My family's laughter floated faintly from across town where they were visiting friends. It didn't sting this time. It only confirmed how unaware they were that their comfort was built on borrowed ground. Night settled slowly. I dimmed the lights and placed my phone on the table, camera facing the front door to record a second angle. 2 cameras, 2 truths. Enough to capture every reaction, every desperate knock that would soon echo through this house. I spent the rest of the night writing a short letter addressed to my family. The words were simple. "You once said I'd never leave because I had nowhere to go. I left long before I locked the door. Love, Mom." I sealed it and left it on the kitchen counter beside a single key, the old one, the one that no longer fit any lock. Symbolism had its place even in war. At midnight the house felt almost sacred. I walked barefoot through each room, touching the walls lightly as if to reassure them they were safe now. The floorboards creaked under my steps and I imagined the house whispering back finally. I didn't sleep. Instead I watched the first pale thread of dawn stretch across the windows. Soon they'd come home expecting warmth, expecting the same woman who cooked and forgave. What they'd find would be colder than they could imagine, justice wrapped in quiet. When the sun fully rose, I gathered my coat and left through the back door, locking it behind me with a soft click. The key turned smoothly, sealing everything I'd prepared. From the outside the house looked ordinary, peaceful, unchanged. But inside it was loaded. A story waiting to explode the moment they tried to open what no longer belonged to them. As I walked toward my car parked under the elm tree, the morning air smelled sharp and clean, like metal after rain. My hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. This wasn't the trembling of fear. It was the stillness of precision. The trap was set. And I had never felt more alive. By late afternoon clouds began to roll in, turning the sky the color of wet stone. The air carried that thick, nervous stillness that comes before a storm, or before a reckoning. I sat in my parked car across the street, half hidden under the shade of the old elm tree. From there I could see everything. The porch lights still off, the curtains drawn, my front garden bending in the wind. My house, my fortress, waiting. I'd been there since noon, the camcorder battery humming quietly beside me. My thermos of tea had gone cold hours ago, but I didn't care. Patience, I told myself. Revenge isn't fire, it's frost. It works best when you let it settle. At 6:30 their car appeared at the far end of the road, headlights slicing through the drizzle. I recognized the rhythm of that engine. I had driven it for 20 years. 3 silhouettes inside. They were back. My pulse didn't quicken this time. It slowed, deliberate, matching the rhythm of the windshield wipers. They pulled into the driveway, laughing about something, unaware of the world they were about to enter. I could almost read their lips through the windshield. My husband saying something smug, my daughter rolling her eyes, my son yawning like a prince bored of privilege. I watched them step out, shoulders hunched against the rain, keys already in hand. The first rattle of metal against metal was almost musical. Then again, louder. "What's wrong with this thing?" my husband muttered. He tried the door twice more. My daughter frowned. "Mom probably locked it from inside." "She's not here, remember?" he snapped. They tried the side door, then the back, each failure feeding their confusion. From my car I could see their gestures growing sharp, impatient. I pressed record on my camcorder. This was the moment. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain thickened, tapping against my windshield like impatient fingers. My husband pulled out his phone. I knew he was calling me. The glow of his screen gave him away. I let it ring. The silence they received must have sounded deafening. Then my daughter knocked hard. "Mom, are you in there? Open up." Her voice cracked, a note of worry creeping in where arrogance used to live. She knocked again, shouting over the rain. My husband's temper flared. "She's doing this on purpose." He kicked the door once, twice. It didn't budge. The locks I chose were holding beautifully. I could almost smell their panic from across the street. The same people who once laughed about me never leaving were now begging to be let back in. It wasn't joy I felt, not exactly. It was justice cooling in my chest like steel. Lightning flashed, illuminating their soaked faces. My daughter's mascara streaked. My son looked small for the first time in his adult life. My husband turned toward the window, shading his eyes to peer inside. That's when he noticed the laptop on the kitchen table, screen glowing softly in the dark. He froze. Even from here I saw it, recognition tightening his shoulders. They crowded by the window, faces pressed to the glass. Then the sound carried through the rain, my voice calm and steady, playing from the video I'd cued earlier. You said you wanted peace. Enjoy it. Their heads snapped back, scanning the yard, the street. I sank lower in my seat, unseen, a ghost with a front row view. Inside the house, the laptop looped the footage of them mocking me, their own words, their own laughter echoing from behind the locked door. My husband shouted something muffled by thunder, probably a curse. My daughter started crying. My son tried to pry open a window with his pocket knife. Futile. Another car slowed nearby, Ruth's. She rolled down her window. "Everything all right over there?" she called out. My husband forced a smile. "Forgot our keys," he yelled over the rain. "Need help?" No, we're fine." She drove on, satisfied, unaware she'd just witnessed the opening scene of their downfall. I checked the camcorder again. The red light blinked steadily. Good. Proof. Evidence of what they'd do when stripped of control. Evidence I could keep forever. Hours stretched. They huddled under the porch, wet and shivering. At one point my husband called the locksmith, only to learn that no one was available until morning. The irony tasted sweet. I imagined him pacing, his mind running through excuses, maybe realizing that the documents were missing, that the money was gone. His phone buzzed with alerts, probably the bank notifications I'd set in motion. By 9, the rain stopped, leaving the world damp and glistening. They were quiet now, exhausted. My daughter sat on the porch step, hugging her knees. My son leaned against the doorframe. My husband stood a few feet away, staring into the street, his face a portrait of disbelief. He'd built his confidence on the idea that I would never change. He hadn't considered that obedience, once broken, never repairs the same way again. I watched him pull out his phone once more. Another call to me. This time I answered. "Mary," he said, voice sharp with relief and anger. "Where are you?" "Watching," I said. "Watching? What are you?" "I told you I was taking a break. This is childish. Open the door right now." "No," I said softly. "You said you wanted the house without me. You have it now. Don't be ridiculous, it's raining." I remember, I cut in. "You laughed about selling it. Maybe start with yourselves instead." He began shouting, but I hung up. The quiet that followed felt like music. I sat back and let them stew. The street lamps flickered on, washing everything in a dull orange haze. The neighborhood was peaceful again, unaware of the quiet revolution happening on one small porch. Around 10, Ruth's dog barked, breaking the silence. My daughter jumped. My son muttered, "This is crazy." My husband finally sat down beside them, soaked and speechless. The power dynamic had flipped entirely. They looked like strangers who'd wandered into someone else's life, and maybe they had. I watched until their movements slowed, fatigue replacing fury. When they finally fell into an uneasy sleep on the porch, I stepped out of my car. The night air was cold and sharp, gravel crunched under my shoes. I walked halfway down the street before stopping. I could see them clearly now, 3 lost figures framed by the door they once claimed ownership of. For a fleeting second, pity brushed my heart, thin as fog. Then I remembered the video, the laughter, the plans to sell everything I built. Pity dissolved. I turned back to my car and drove a few blocks away, parking near the community park. I needed the distance, not to hide but to breathe. Inside the car I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages full of panic. "Mom, please open." "Where did you go?" "We're sorry." No, they weren't sorry. They were scared. And there's a difference. I spent the next hour writing in my notebook by the light of the dashboard. They mocked the woman who stayed. Tonight they'll learn what absence feels like. When I looked up, it was close to midnight. The rain clouds had thinned. The moon slid out from behind them, pale and indifferent. I decided to return one last time just to see. Driving slowly past the house, I kept my headlights off. The porch light had come on, automatic timer. Its glow revealed the 3 of them still huddled there, motionless except for my daughter's shivering shoulders. On the table beside them, the old envelope I'd labeled for the deserving sat unopened. I wondered when they'd notice it. Maybe morning. Maybe never. I parked again and stepped out quietly, the cool wind lifting the edge of my scarf. Across the street, a cat darted under a car. Everything felt suspended, the kind of stillness before dawn when even guilt seems to hold its breath. I stood there for a long moment, taking in the scene. My husband looked older now, his hair plastered to his forehead. My son's arrogance had melted into confusion. My daughter's tears streaked clean paths down her cheeks. Consequence had a face and it looked exactly like this. Then came the faint wail of a siren in the distance. Slow, approaching. I had made a call earlier in the evening, a simple one. A trespassing report made anonymously. They refused to leave, I had said. The operator promised to send someone to check. Minutes later, blue and red lights washed over the wet street. The reflection danced across my house like a warning. The officers stepped out, their radios crackling. My husband jumped to his feet, trying to explain. My daughter sobbed harder. My son backed away, hands raised slightly. The officers asked for identification for proof of residence. My husband stammered. The documents, all of them, were inside. From the shadows, I watched the conversation unfold. The officers didn't arrest anyone. They simply escorted them away from the porch, suggesting they sort this out in the morning. But the humiliation in my husband's posture was enough. I knew that look, the weight of public exposure without a single word spoken in his defense. When the police car drove off, leaving them at the end of the street, I stepped forward one final step, unseen. The porch light flickered once, and the house behind it stood calm, untouched, and perfectly locked. That was when I realized something unexpected. I wasn't angry anymore. The fury that had burned for days had cooled into something quieter, purer. Freedom. Not revenge, not cruelty, just release. I turned and walked back to my car, the gravel crunching softly beneath my feet. As I slid behind the wheel, I glanced at the camcorder resting on the passenger seat. The red light had stopped blinking. Its job was done. I pressed a finger to its warm casing and whispered, "Thank you for remembering when they forgot." The sky was starting to pale on the horizon, hinting at the first sign of morning. I started the engine and drove toward the road that led out of town. In the rearview mirror, my house stood firm and silent, the porch empty now except for puddles reflecting the last shimmer of police lights. It was over for tonight, but not finished. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, signatures, the quiet formalities of justice. But this night, this long rain-soaked night, had already delivered what I needed most. Proof that I could reclaim what was mine without shouting, without breaking, without blood. I drove until the streetlights faded and the open road welcomed me with its empty calm. The wind moved through the cracked window, cold and cleansing. Somewhere behind me, the locks I'd chosen held steady against the world I had left behind. And for the first time in years, I felt safe inside my own silence. The road stretched ahead in a soft gray ribbon, wet from the night rain, glinting under the newborn light. I didn't drive far, just enough to feel distance without leaving entirely. The engine's hum steadied my thoughts, letting the night settle behind me like dust. By the time I reached the seaside cabin I'd rented months earlier, the sky had turned silver and calm. Fitting, I thought. A place that smelled of salt and endings. Inside, the cabin was small but clean. A kettle, a narrow bed, 2 chairs. I set the camcorder on the table, rewound the footage, and let it play without sound. Their faces flickered across the screen. Confusion, fear, disbelief. It was everything they'd once denied me. Reaction, awareness, consequence. I paused the frame on my husband's expression when the police lights hit him. He looked so human then, stripped of certainty. I almost pitied him. Almost. The kettle whistled. I poured hot water into my cup and sat by the window. The sea was restless, the waves slapping at the shore like a steady heartbeat. Every breath tasted of salt and quiet victory. I wasn't hiding. I was observing the world without being observed. That, I realized, was freedom. By mid-morning my phone buzzed relentlessly, 32 missed calls, 16 messages. I didn't open them. But curiosity nudged me to check one voicemail. My daughter's voice trembled. "Mom, please, we didn't mean it. Can we talk?" Behind her, I could hear my husband's voice, lower, angrier. "Tell her we'll fix it if she just comes back." Fix it. as if betrayal were a broken hinge that just needed oil. I deleted the message and turned off the phone. Later that afternoon, Ms. Harris, my lawyer, called the landline at the cabin. "It's all finalized," she said. "The house is under your sole name again and the trespass complaint is filed. They can't contest it." "Thank you," I said softly. "You've given me my peace." "I didn't give it," she replied. "You took it." After the call, I drove back into town, not to the house, not yet, but close enough to see the street from the hill. Their car was gone. The porch was empty except for a few damp towels left behind. The sight filled me with a strange mix of sadness and relief. Strange how loss can look like cleanliness. For the first time, the house didn't look haunted. It looked awake. I parked by Ruth's fence. She was pruning her roses, humming softly. When she saw me, she waved. "Harry." He gave me a scare disappearing like that. "Those police lights last night. Everything okay?" I smiled. "Everything's fine now." She leaned on her shears. "Your husband looked furious." "Fury burns fast," I said. "Peace lasts longer." He chuckled, not understanding. "Come by for tea later." "I might," I said, though I knew I wouldn't. I walked up to the porch, keys jingling in my pocket. The door opened easily, the new locks turning smooth and obedient. Inside, the air smelled faintly of rain and lemon polish. Nothing was out of place. My letter, "You once said I'd never leave because I had nowhere to go," still lay on the table beside the useless old key. They hadn't even read it. Or perhaps they had and couldn't face what it meant. I moved through each room slowly, almost ceremonially. The walls were quiet again, free of echoes. In the living room, the laptop sat closed on the table. I touched its lid, remembering how their voices had filled this space. The cruelty that once haunted me now felt like a recorded show whose finale I had already seen. It couldn't hurt anymore. Upstairs, I found a note slid under my bedroom door. My daughter's handwriting, wet and smeared. "Mom, we're sorry. Please talk to us." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the fireplace. Paper curls quickly in heat, guilt even faster. The flame flared orange, then gone. I spent the next few hours setting everything back in order. Laundry folded, dishes stacked, windows cleaned. Routine has a way of reminding you who you are. When I finished, I sat at the piano for the first time in years. My fingers stumbled through a familiar tune, the same lullaby I used to play when the kids couldn't sleep. The notes came slower now, softer, but they filled the house with something warm. Not joy exactly, but reclamation. I wasn't playing for them anymore. I was playing for the woman they'd underestimated. By late afternoon there was a knock. 2, then 3 deliberate taps. I hesitated before opening the door. It was my husband. He stood there in the sunlight, holding an umbrella though the rain had stopped. His eyes were bloodshot. "Can we talk?" he asked. "We can stand," I said. "I'm not inviting you in." He looked past me into the hallway. "Mary, this is absurd. You locked us out of our home." "No," I said. "I locked you out of mine." He exhaled sharply. "You're angry." "Careful," I cut in. "Anger implies I still care what you think." He swallowed. "We were just talking that night. It was stupid humor." "You filmed it," I said. The words landed like stones. He flinched. "It was meant to be." "Proof?" "Yes." "It proved everything." His silence confirmed it. The rainwater dripping from his umbrella matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. Steady, final. "You can't just erase your family," he said finally. "Family," I echoed. "A family builds. You dismantled. I'm simply finishing the work." He stared at me, searching for some trace of the woman who used to forgive him. I let him look. Then I closed the door gently between us. The lock clicked, crisp and satisfying. A full stop at the end of a long sentence. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching twilight settle over the neighborhood. The sky blushed purple before darkening into velvet. Ruth's porch light flickered on. Somewhere far down the street, a dog barked, then silence returned. My house glowed softly behind me, light spilling through its windows like something alive again. For a moment I thought of my children, not with bitterness but distance. Maybe someday they'd understand that love without respect isn't love at all. Maybe they wouldn't. Either way, it was no longer my duty to teach them. Inside, the phone rang once more. I let it go to voicemail. My daughter's voice filled the room, faint through the speaker. Mom, please, we have nowhere to go tonight. Dad says he'll fix everything. Can we come home? I pressed the button and erased the message. The word home didn't belong to them anymore. Later, I lit a small candle on the kitchen counter and watched its flame dance. Its reflection shimmered against the new locks on the back door, tiny sparks of light in polished metal. Justice, I thought, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it flickers quietly, steady and sure. Before bed, I opened the window and let the sea breeze roll in, cool and forgiving. I climbed under the quilt, the sheets smelling of lavender and clean beginnings. Sleep came quickly, deep, dreamless, peaceful. When morning arrived, I woke to sunlight filling the room and the sound of waves faintly in the distance. No fear, no weight. Just calm. After breakfast, I wrote one final entry in my notebook. Freedom isn't leaving, it's staying without asking permission. Then I tore out every previous page, the lists, the plans, the anger, and fed them to the fire. Smoke curled up the chimney, carrying years of silence into the sky. At noon, Miss Harris arrived with a folder. The sale attempt's been withdrawn, she said. They signed the renunciation papers this morning. Did they? I asked. Yes. They looked defeated. I nodded. Then it's done. She hesitated. What will you do now? I smiled faintly. Live in the house I already built. Alone if I'm lucky. When she left, I stepped outside. The garden glistened under the noon light, drops of water sparkling on every leaf. I picked a single rose, red, fully open, and placed it in a small vase by the window. My hands didn't shake this time. Evening returned quietly. I poured myself a glass of wine, turned on the lamp by the armchair and opened the piano lid again. My reflection in its polished surface looked steady, certain. I touched the first key and the note rang clear, carrying through the halls that were mine alone. Every wall echoed back, not with laughter or cruelty but with acknowledgement. The house knew its owner again. When the final note faded, I closed the lid, took a slow breath, and whispered the words I'd waited half a lifetime to say. I am not what you left behind. I am what you lost. Outside, the wind rustled through the garden, and somewhere beyond it, the sea answered with its eternal rhythm. Inside, behind new locks and clean walls, justice rested, quiet, complete, and finally mine. If you believe every story deserves justice, hit subscribe and tell me, where are you watching from today? I'll be here tomorrow with another story that proves silence can be powerful.